What I really wanted to talk about today was, we've talked about digitisation and transformation internally within an organisation. So we've talked about how we're transforming our internal workflows, how we're making our organisations more efficient. What I want to talk to the subject now is, how are the new age businesses of today transforming the model as far as their go-to-market model is concerned, and how are they actually digitising to reach new markets that have never been reached or have never been created before. So we've brought up this slide a couple of times. Adam's spoken to it, Hayley's spoken to it. I'm now going to be the third person to speak to it. I this time want to have a look at the two bottom numbers, the 77% and the 55%. So 77% of businesses in total today are worried about digital disruption. And to be fair, we should all be worried, because if we're not going forward, we're going backwards. But 55% of those same businesses are also looking at digital disruption as an opportunity for change, as I said, to access new markets and to access new technologies. So taking that into consideration, what I wanted to do is I wanted to look at some of the iconic brands that we all know from the big, lovely corporations that we all love to use and work with. And I wanted to look at some of the changes that they've made over the coming past 2 decades. Starting at Blockbuster and Netflix. Who's a Gen Y here today, out of interest? Yeah, okay, few people, yeah. Are you sure, Adam? I don't know if you are a Gen Y. You put down your hand. So in the year 2000, Netflix approached Blockbuster to effectively look at a combined merger or an acquisition of Netflix to Blockbuster for the sale price of $50 million. Now, the idea was that basically Netflix, with their great online content strategy, not yet existing in Blockbuster or anybody else, effectively said that we will be your online content strategy moving forward. Blockbuster, without the forevision to be able to actually say and see where that could actually go in the future, thinking that who wants to use the internet to basically deliver video content, said no and declined the offer. Now in 2004, Blockbuster reached their peak. They had 84,300 employees. That's more employees currently than Telstra has today, one of Australia's biggest organisations and biggest single employers. Now, in the year 2010, Blockbuster were bankrupt. In fact, not so only recently, their last store in Sydney actually closed down. I had the fun piece of writing a blog article on it. Now, today, this week, Netflix was valued at $83 billion. Now, moving on, we have a look at the Nokia Apple story. At its peak in 2000, Nokia was valued at $211 billion. In 2007, the launch of the iPhone year, they had 49.4% market share. They had a software system, some of you may remember. Let's not kick that too much. They had a software system, some of you may remember, called Symbian. It was clunky, it was hard to use, it wasn't friendly, it wasn't intuitive. Apple iPhone came out, they delivered the first smartphone on the market which was intuitive to the finger, to the human brain, and the experience was simple, beautiful, and perfect. Go forward, have a look at Nokia and their story. In the year 2010, they dropped to 15% market share, at which time Microsoft picked them up. Now, go forward from there and we have a look at 2008. And there was a comparison made between the Wyndham Hotel Group, one of the largest hotel groups at the time in 1974, which had, at that stage, 8,000 hotel rooms. They had 32,000 staff, and they had revenues of $7 billion. Now, Phil actually mentioned Airbnb before. 2008, that same comparison was made to Airbnb then. They had 0 hotel rooms, 2,000 staff, and $30 billion in revenue. Now, we move forward and we look at Tesla and GM. April 2017 this year, Tesla was finally valued as the most valuable automotive company in the American, or on the American stock market, second following GM, which had to that time been the most valuable. Now, what's interesting about that is that in that same financial year, GM did a profit of $9 billion. If we have a look at Tesla, they did a net loss of $776,000. We have a look at the cars manufactured. GM manufactured 10 million vehicles. Tesla manufactured 76,000. Very interesting just to note how the market and customers are measuring some of these businesses as they go forward into the future. Now, the last one that I find really interesting, probably most people here today have heard of Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies. The banking system, the reserve banks, governments, all watching this with a lot of interest. It is the one technology that has been created that is a currency not based on any government or any backing of anything. Yet, the value of this, I think today or this week, was somewhere around $7,000 per Bitcoin, is incredible. And the banks are looking at it, the reserve banks are looking at it, and they don't know where this technology is going to go in the future and what it will do. So we've looked at some of the big names in terms of transitioning business models. Let's have a look at now the new technology of IoT. It's been spoken a little bit about today. The first thing to try and actually have a look at there is that a survey actually shows 87% of people still don't actually know what that term stands for, let alone understand what it actually means. Can I just, anybody here today, how many people in the audience, if I could get a raise of hands, how many people in the audience actually understand what IoT is and what it actually stands for as an acronym? Oh, funnily enough, okay, we've got a very educated bunch. Okay, well, for the people that don't, IoT stands for the Internet of Things. The most basic way of understanding it is it's devices connected to the internet, feeding your information up to the cloud, or up to servers, or up to somewhere. Now, we could really say that IoT started back in 1974 when we had the first global rollouts of ATMs, which were all connected to the internet. Now, a milestone date for IoT was 2008, because in 2008, it was estimated then that there was more devices connected to the internet than there was physical humans standing on this planet. Today, that number is estimated to be somewhere around $10 billion, so 10 billion devices. If we have a look at what economists are predicting, though, over the next coming years, by 2020, they're estimating that that number is going to increase by between 25 and 50 billion devices. And when you think about that, all those vacuum cleaners, those fridges, those washing machines, the consumer market that is now loving this idea of connected devices are all jumping onto this. So hence, that number is going to grow very rapidly and very quickly. So what's the economic picture about that? Well, since 2011, investment in IoT has grown by 300%. Economists are predicting that the opportunity over the next decade of IoT is going to present between 4 and 19 trillion globally. And guess what? Australia gets a really good slice of that because Australia, we're very tech-savvy people. That's why I love living here. Sorry. Now, if we have a look at some of the key industries that are actually winning out of this, and of course you can see some of my lovely little pictures here to explain oil and mining and gas, etc., etc. But if we start with wearable devices, devices that basically are enabled to take our blood pressure, to take our heart rate, to take our blood sugar levels, to take our sleep or our sleep apnea in some cases, and take all of that information, feeding it up to the cloud, constantly analysing it, constantly looking at it. What does that mean to somebody who's a doctor or a health professional? Well, now rather than being a reactive approach in health, we start to have the opportunity to be a proactive management in terms of health. So hopefully that heart attack that somebody was going to have may not happen because we can see all the things that are happening in advance prior to that before that actual condition happens to that patient. Now, if we go to another industry and we have a look at cars, by 2020, Gartner is predicting that over 250 million cars will be connected globally to the internet, led probably by our friends Tesla. Now, if we start to think about what that actually means in terms of driving, autonomous vehicles, being talked about a lot, right? We know Uber's just put in their first order as of a couple of days ago for their first set of Volvos as they start to roll out their own driverless cars. But if we can have a successful technology implemented in terms of autonomous vehicle driving, then we can start to look at eliminating things like driver fatigue, drink driving, and to be fair, just those really stupid drivers that aren't very good drivers. I've got a couple in my family and I will put up my hand to say I'm a horrible driver. So I'm really looking forward to this technology. But overall, what does that mean? Hopefully what it means is less accidents, and hopefully what it means is less deaths on the road, and less people affected in their lives in terms of families, etc., by those people who have been affected by those types of accidents. Now, the last one I'm going to talk about on that big list there today of winners is energy management. South Australia is one of the biggest states at the moment that is having big issues in this particular area. At the end of the day, costs of energy are high here. And so energy is one of the top lists of a lot of people in terms of a lot of organisations in terms of what they're doing about it. So I'm going to invite up, actually, funnily enough, my brother. We're going to meet him in a second. But I'm going to invite up my brother who works for a company called Azzo, a South Australian-based company, an electrical engineering firm, a company who's been born and bred out of the era of IoT, selling into markets that have never been created or have never been around in the past 2 decades. I guess, first of all, for the audience, can you give a bit of introduction to Azzo and some of the products and services that kind of you guys deliver and where you fit in terms of this whole ecosystem?
Sure, thanks Darren, and good morning ladies and gentlemen. I think we're still morning just, so it's great to be here. It's been a great event and really enjoying it. Well, it's actually a good question, Darren, because even a lot of our family and friends ask that question, what is it you exactly do? And having to explain it. So in brief, what Azzo does is they design, implement and support energy management solutions. And as many would be aware here today, there's 2 really powerful drivers at play in society today, and that's the cost of energy and also the environmental impact of carbon emissions. And those two drivers are playing a big role with business and institution needing to change the way that they view and use energy, and the need to be able to use it more responsibly and to be able to track and know where it's going. So for a lot of those businesses and institutions, you will start seeing positions now made for energy managers, sustainability officers that have been engaged to help to understand where the energy usage is happening and to also see what kind of change and initiatives can be implemented in order to meet certain energy and carbon emission reduction targets. So for Azzo, we have a particular saying at Azzo that you can't control what you can't measure. And so one of the big offerings for Azzo, as you can sort of see in the MCG video, is that we provide a tool to our customers, which is a combination of multi-sensing devices and a software platform that all comes together. And a bit like Steve was saying before, we're not just selling the bits, we're actually bringing the solution together. And that particular tool that we offer our customers, the likes of the energy managers and the sustainability officers, helps them to actually track in real time and historically their energy use and be able to see where it's travelling. Now the benefit of that and being able to measure it is that all of a sudden they can start to understand, where are the opportunities for savings. And there might be some low-hanging fruit that they can pick, but they can also start to take that raw data, as Dan mentioned before, and with all the dashboards, the analytics and the reports, start to turn that into useful information and actionable items and are able to then implement some change and initiatives. Now the benefit too of the tool is that they can then come back and validate that those savings were actually achieved. So in brief, that's what Azzo does. They design, implement and support energy management solutions.
Okay, so Azzo has had a long journey from our discussions in terms of pre-IoT, servers, cabling, all that kind of stuff. What did previous solutions you delivered look like prior to IoT? When did Azzo first start connecting devices via IoT, and how did this come about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I might even start with what did previous energy management solutions look like. You may remember well, Darren, but I remember as a little kid going to Nana and Grandpa's place, and out in the back room at the back door on the wall there was this black box with some dials on it and some numbers and this little spinning disc. And it used to make these funny noises, but you probably guessed it, it's one of the old retailer meters that was out there. Now, if you were a very energy conscious person, good at maths and generally stayed up late, before you went to bed every night at 12 a.m, if you took a reading on that meter and you did that every day for 7 days, at the end of that week, you'd be able to calculate exactly how much energy you used each day for that.
I'd be working out how to turn back the meter rather than just calculating, but to be fair, I'm a CFO.
That's a good point. People do that. But you can then, from that data set, probably deduce that, well, Tuesdays was Nana's baking day, the oven was always on, and that was the highest use day. Now, if you're a very dedicated person, you might do that for a year, but it would be quite cumbersome and it's a lot of work to do that. And you can imagine for a big place like Adelaide Oval with potential meters like that everywhere, people having to take manual reads, particularly at a granularity if you wanted to do 15-minute snapshots, that's a lot of meter reading that people are going to have to do, a lot of man hours and a lot of cost. So previous energy management solutions were quite limited. Now, fortunately, though, for Azzo and on our journey, we've had some access to some really good sort of hardware products and software, which, to play on words of the Internet of Things, we might call the local connection of things. So these particular multi-sensing devices, digital devices, are able to be networked back to a local server machine on site running the software platform. And the site could actually, utilise the software platform to do a lot of the analytics and reporting. Now, as far as where the, Internet of Things and cloud comes into it, there's probably a couple of issues with that model of the local connection of things. And that is that for a customer that has multiple sites that they actually want to monitor from one platform, becomes very costly in terms of the cabling, wired infrastructure, the IT infrastructure, and also the IT support team needed to actually set up that infrastructure to run a multi-site system on that kind of model. Further to that, there's a lot of customers now that are actually wanting to move their servers, as we've seen in our presentations today, off-site and have them hosted. So those sort of two things in combination have really led to Azzo exploring the Internet of Things in the cloud over the last 2 years, and thanks to the likes of Telstra, Microsoft, and Calibre One, we've been able to come and get a solution together that makes use of Telstra's private WAN and cloud solutions to bring hosted EMS solutions to our customers for the types of projects requiring multi-site or other things. So.
Okay, so talking through some of these recent projects, obviously we saw the MCG, some great kind of actually cool big project. Can you talk us through another recent project where you kind of deployed a full solution, purely using IoT? Hoping you can kind of cover off some things like what the customer issue was, an outcome, the deployment of how IoT was actually used, and maybe some of the positive outcomes because of IoT that ended up coming out of that at the end.
Yeah, sure, yeah. Yeah, well, the project that comes to mind would be La Trobe University. So La Trobe University in Victoria has 6 campuses across the state, and they also, I think, have a campus in Sydney, New South Wales. So a great example of a large multi-site EMS project. And La Trobe, has quite a number of sort of different needs, but we used the La Trobe project as a great case study to them of where Internet of Things and a cloud-hosted solution was going to really work for them. So for them, one of their, desired outcomes or customer needs was that, like I mentioned before, they have sustainability officers and energy managers that have to start to get a handle on where all their energy use is going across their campuses and start accounting for it and putting in place initiatives of how they can drive change and reduce their carbon footprint and energy costs going forward. So that was one of the big things in play. Along with that, La Trobe University actually runs their own high voltage network for powering the area and even some of the suburbs around. So they actually have an engineering team as part of the La Trobe group that needs to actually be able to monitor and understand what's going on with their electrical infrastructure. So there was a big need for La Trobe University to be able to have a full functioning EMS solution that gave them real-time access information to all the high voltage switchgear, as well as a comprehensive package that would give them the analytics for all their energy reporting and carbon reporting as well. So again, one of the challenges for La Trobe was that with a lot of campuses, a lot of areas that were going to need multi-sensing devices, the cabling and wired infrastructure and IT costs required to do that on sort of a wide solution would end up being very costly. So they also had the challenge that they, where possible, wanted to mitigate the need to have to go through the IT department. So no offence to any IT departments here, but sometimes that can be a big challenge to delivering a project like this. So that was some of their sort of needs. In terms of how we went about rolling it out, we were successful in the bid with the project, delivering it for them, and we received from La Trobe University a brief of what they actually wanted to capture and monitor. And so once that was all underway, we deployed our engineers and electricians to site, who then went through like a detailed feasibility study of what they wanted monitored and how we can go about monitoring it. What kind of devices we would need to use, what kind of communications with 3G SIMs, the modems, the coverage at the site, and then also into the electrical installation side of what would be required. So we then went away with all that information, put together some detailed architectures of how it would all come together. We wrote a specification on the requirements for the installation because we had to provide that to Latrobe because they were tendering out the installation side. And then what we did is then we went away, designed and put together these meter panel kits, which we probably see in some photos. You'll start to see what we're talking about in terms of the multi-sensing devices and some of the architectures and the installations and how this has all sort of come together. So we would then, in our factory here at Azzo, put all the panels together. We'd pre-test and pre-commission the equipment, check all the connectivity to the cloud so that when it was installed on site and powered up, we'd be very confident that we would have uplink straight away and connectivity to the system. So once the installations had been done across the campuses and into the particular electrical infrastructure, once it was validated and tested, which we went through with the electrical contractors, we were then able to integrate all those multi-sensing devices into the software platform, a little bit like we saw with MCG, and start to bring to the front for the customer, for Latrobe University, all the real-time information to do with the HV network, as well as all the reporting and analytics that went along with it. So that was, I guess, overview in brief of the Latrobe project. Now, some of the positive outcomes, I guess, of it was certainly the fact that we were able to deliver something that the customer was pleased with, usable and met their expectations. But perhaps one of the big positives is that with over 250 devices connected to the software platform, if they had to roll out cabling infrastructure for that and a lot of the IT and support, probably in the hundreds of thousands of dollars cost-wise. So in order to, like by going with the Internet of Things solution and cloud solution, they've mitigated a lot of that cost and it's been a big cost saving to the customer.
Okay. So last question of the day. When we talk now about Azzo's changing model, so how has Azzo's model in terms of revenue and business model changed since, I guess, going of those days where you used to deploy the cabling and the servers and the little devices that were connecting into them to moving to a world of Internet of Things?
Yeah, that's a good question. Maybe two brief comments on that. A little bit on the back of the Latrobe case study. There's probably a big change in the model in that by offering a cloud-based solution with the Internet of Things, there's a little bit of a sense in which we can offer a project at a lower cost. Because some of that cabling infrastructure doesn't need to be accounted for, all of a sudden the EMS project can be a little bit cheaper and sometimes is what is required to get a project across the line. So certainly
So it made it easier to sell from the sales team perspective.
Yeah, that's right.
Every sales team generally likes
that. Exactly. As well as the fact that it's scalable. So, you know, you're not necessarily having to put in all this infrastructure straight away. It's a scalable sort of solution. And that probably brings me to the next point is that we end up with a subscription-based model. So a lot of the examples, you know, you sort of brought up, particularly like the Netflix, the Spotify, Office 365, as many of us would probably use, are all subscription-based models. So, you know, as long as you're subscribed, you know, you get the full functionality of the software. And it's similar in this regard, where we offer the platform on a subscription-based model. The customer doesn't own the software. They don't have to purchase the server outright. It's all on a subscription-based model, so they can go from, I guess, more of a CapEx type expenditure to more of an OpEx. So that's helped us move to more of an annuity-based model rather than purely just a project transactional model.